Before I begin, I gotta give you a fair warning. This story is absolutely true, unfortunately. It is also very long. It goes back to my childhood, but it wasn't as terrifying until very recently. Now I am completely lost in fear. I am an adult man, logical and intelligent, or I'd like to believe so, sitting in my bed, scared shitless right now, goosebumps all over my body and tears of horror in my eyes. I ask for your help in explaining this fucking horrifying thing. Caution, you'll notice that I curse quite a bit. I want you to know that what you read from now on is the situation perceived by my mind. I like to think that I am a very rational person, and I haven't been able to explain these occurrences in any natural way. Since my mom got a new job, she started making new friends. It is common in our country that friends come to each other's houses for a cup of coffee, cake, gossip, and whatnot. Few weeks into her new job, my mom made friends with this woman, Rose. She would come maybe twice a week, and they'd sit around the coffee table on our balcony and just talk. One day when I was 17, I was at the balcony with them. I'm not sure why I was there, but knowing me, I probably ran out of internet hours. Back in a day we bought internet monthly per hour in my country and was bored as fuck. So we're sitting there, they're gossiping about who knows what, and mom gets up to go get some cake she had baked recently. I remained sitting at the table with Rose, and that's when my life changed forever. Rose was a good-looking woman. She was about 5', skinny, long black hair, pearly white teeth. Attractive woman overall. So anyways, I am sitting there with her, and she turns to me. She has this creepy grin on her face. Bright red lipstick with bright white teeth underneath are just making it look more scary. Her head is moving slowly, almost as if she became a puppet. She says something in the lowest tone possible, certainly not loud enough for me to understand. Excuse me, I say, still not being scared. Just a bit weirded out. You ready to go now? She said this in a voice of a child, I kid you not. Like maybe an 8-year-old girl. Grin is still there. She mustered those words through her teeth, never opening the jaw. What I ask, starting to get scared. You ready? The same thing again. Only this time, she pulls out an orange out of her purse. That's it, she just took the orange out and held it there. Didn't offer it, didn't eat it herself, just held the fucking thing. At that point, I was getting scared as fuck. Thankfully, my mom came with the cake. Rose, almost as if someone pushed a button on a remote control, switched back to her normal self, putting the orange back into her purse without my mom noticing. I left the balcony creeped out, but I was 17, so I brushed it off quickly. That night, I had trouble sleeping. My room is on the first floor and my window is at a maybe 5 height, so I kept looking at it praying not to see some scary monster. I would turn in my bed constantly and look at the window maybe every 5 minutes. It was getting late and I started to doze off, but decided to look into the window one last time. And there she fucking was, standing in the fucking window. Rose. Just standing, looking directly at me. Moonlight was bright enough for me to see, with the same grin on her face. Lipstick was red as ever, and teeth were wither than ever. I was paralyzed with fear. I often imagined what I'd do in situations like these, and I always had an escape plan for any hypothetical I threw at myself. But now, when this friend of my mother's was staring at me through my window at 4 a.m., just smiling, I was motionless. My mouth got dry. I got goosebumps, have them now as I type this, and I swear it became freezing in my room, probably just the way the body reacts to shock. I finally gathered the courage to get up. I started walking towards the door. Her head was turning with me, slowly, with the grin still there. Again, it was as if she were a puppet. I wanted to scream for my parents, but knowing how tense they are, I decided not to cause panic just yet. There had to be some rational explanation, right? For fuck knows what reason, I decided to walk to the window and ask her what the fuck her problem was. I made 2 slow steps towards it and froze. I froze because she moved. You know what her movement was? Taking the orange out of her purse. Does anyone know what the record time is for having goosebumps? Because they sure as shit aren't going away. Anyways, after being terrified for a minute, I decided to go on. I am a big guy and figured I'd be able to fight her off if push comes to shove. My windows pull up in order to open. I pull it open maybe some 10 inches and stop. She's not moving, just holding the fucking orange and looking at me with the scariest grin you'll ever see. I stand there. She stands there. Then she starts bending. But every move she makes is so slow, so mechanical. She's bending so she can reach the open part of the window. I'm horrified. She pushes her head through it, just enough space for her head to go through. You go with me now, as she's saying that. In her 8-year-old voice, her hand is making its way through the crack, holding an orange. What do I do? What you do? Fucking run. I run out of my room screaming for my dad. My dad, being a light sleeper, he jumps out of his bed and screams back at me asking what the hell is going on. All I can muster to say is Rose ... window while dad is putting his pants on. I run back to my room, wanting Rose to be there so he can see that I'm not crazy. You know how in horror movies the person you saw is gone by the time witnesses come? Yay, well, similar thing happened, except I caught Rose leaving. There is a house some 100 yards away from mine, and it had one of those motion-activated lights, lots of crime back home. I saw the light turn on, and a glimpse of Rose disappearing behind that house. By the time Dad ran into my room, she was gone. After much talking, he decided that it was just a nightmare and told me to call him only if someone physically comes into my room. You and your fucking imagination, he said, walking away. Needless to say, I got exactly 0 hours of sleep that night. Nothing happened in the next few months. Rose would still come to visit my mom, but I'd make sure I wasn't there. Fuck that. As in every teenager's life, so many things were happening around me, and I forgot about the Rose incident. Then one day, I was spending my afternoon browsing internet years before Reddit, unfortunately. I got pretty hungry, so as any spoiled child, I yelled from my room to see if my mom would come. She didn't. Oh well, tough luck. I have to go to the kitchen and make myself a sandwich. Kitchen in our house is connected to the living room. But you can't see the living room until you're at least in the middle of the kitchen. So I open the kitchen and walk in. I freeze. There it is, right there on the kitchen table. An orange. Immediate thought of that creepy night. Rose is here. I am still motionless in my spot. Few seconds later, I realize how stupid I am for relating a common piece of fruit to a crazy window stalker. So I walk towards the table, wanting to put the orange back in the fruit cabinet. I grab the thing and hear the voice behind me, "You will have to come with me soon," you know, child's voice. It's Rose. I produce some kind of noise resembling scared pig about to get slaughtered. Lightning fast, I turn around and there she is, standing in the middle of the living room. Just standing there, same grin on her face, same lipstick on her lips, teeth white as ever. Only she started tilting her head to the left a bit. In slow motion. I remember it as if it happened yesterday, her long black hair falling down her shoulders, white summer dress, bright red shoes to match her lipstick. I forgot to mention that she was very pale. Even in the summer, she seemed to not be friends with the sun. This added to creepiness. There's this woman who already scared the shit out of me once, standing alone in the middle of my living room, pale as a ghost, bright red lipstick and shoes, tilting her head to the side, speaking in child's voice. And then, she takes an orange out of her purse, takes it out slowly, and looks at me as if she wants me to have it. Just as my self-defense mode is about to take over, and I either run away or tackle the crazy bitch, my mom walks in. I know it didn't happen, but it seemed like my mom brought the light into the room. I released a breath of relief. Rose, of course, went back to her normal self. They were about to go for a walk, and my mom was getting ready in her room while she was pulling her grudge shit on me. Life in my house had started to become twisted a few months ago. The amount of strange and psychotic incidents I had dealt with seemed to grow by the day. My 6-year-old daughter, Brandy, used to be a heavy sleeper before all this started. She would fall asleep on the couch while watching TV, and I would often end up carrying her to her bed. But lately, she never slept. Every time I woke up in the master bedroom, I would catch a glimpse of a small face peeking around the door, silently disappearing into the shadows of the house, unrestrained glee on her small face. My wife had the most severe personality changes of all. She wasn't the woman I had married. All of her warmth, compassion, and humanity had suddenly disappeared, leaving some monstrous shell behind. Like my daughter, she never seemed to sleep anymore. She would disappear into the dark forest behind the house at night, wandering in her nightgown, barefoot, like a pale ghost disappearing into the mist. One night, I remember waking up from a nightmare. The bathroom light dimly illuminated the master bedroom where I slept. I turned to my wife and found her already awake, staring at me with an insane expression, her eyes bulging out of their sockets, a wide, lunatic grin spread across her face. I sat straight up in bed, my heart palpitating with fear. "Is something wrong?" I asked, but she continued to stare at me with that inhuman expression, her eyes gleaming. "Emma, are you okay?" I felt something wet and sticky soaking into my t-shirt. I looked down on the bed and saw a freshly dead possum laying between us, its head twisted around, its torso sliced down the middle. Intestines spilled out onto the sheets, staining them. The smell of blood and death hit me all at once, and I jumped out of bed without another word, grabbing new clothes and running to the bathroom. I locked myself in, hyperventilating for a few moments. Then I managed to calm myself down. I checked the lock again, then I stripped naked and took a long shower, wiping the blood off my skin over and over. No matter how much soap I used, I still felt stained. When I was done, I opened the door a tiny crack and peered through. The bedroom looked empty. I had no idea where my wife was, and I didn't care. I quickly ran to the guest bedroom, locking the door behind me. And for the last couple months, I've slept there every night, a can of police mace on the nightstand next to the bed, a brand new deadbolt on the door. The open door. The next morning, I met my friend Richie at a local diner. I had called out sick from work, and as I sat in the booth waiting for him to arrive, my hands shook uncontrollably. I spilled coffee on the table and on myself more than a few times. I hadn't slept since the incident and was only running on a couple hours. I saw Richie arrive, striding through the front door. He wore a t-shirt to show off the tattoos on his arms. With his dirty blonde hair and blue eyes, he had a very Irish cast to his face. He sat down across from me, looking me up and down quickly and frowning slightly. He saw all of the spill marks on the table, the napkins I had used to do a half-assed job of cleaning it up, my trembling hands and sunken, tired eyes. I'm sure I was quite a sight. "What's up, Thorne?" he asked simply, not smiling. Like a lot of my friends, he always called me by my last name rather than by Julius. I shook my head. "I don't know, man," I said. "Some weird shit has been going on. Like really weird. I'm scared, man. I really am," he nodded. "Yeah, I can tell," he said. "You know I'm always here for you. Whatever you need, just call." "Thanks," I said, trying to smile slightly. "Now, why don't you tell me what's going on?" he said. "I'm all ears. Tell me everything, and maybe we can figure out something." At that moment, the waitress came, taking our orders and bringing Richie some coffee. Once she had gone, I told him everything that had happened. I didn't leave out a single detail. By the time I was done, our breakfast had arrived and we were both on our third cups of coffee. I still felt drained, however. The caffeine seemed to make me feel more tired, if anything. "Hisham," Richie said thoughtfully, eating a piece of bacon off his plate. He stared across the room, his eyes looking 1,000 miles away, deep in thought. "That is weird." "I think it's more than weird," I said. "It's fucking psychotic. I'm scared to go home. I'm scared to be in the same room with my own wife and daughter." "Yeah," he said, nodding, chugging the rest of his burning hot coffee in one long swallow. "It is. Psychotic, I mean, what do you think is happening?" The question caught me by surprise. I choked on my coffee, coughing. "Me?" I asked. "I have no goddamned idea what's happening. All I know is my wife and daughter have turned into lunatics. If it was just one of them acting weird, maybe I'd think it was mental illness, schizophrenia, or something." He smiled slightly at that, but his eyes remained grave. I think the seriousness with which he took the situation freaked me out nearly as much as the situation itself. "But it's not one. It's both," he pointed out. "And yet, not you. You seem totally fine." "So what's your point?" I asked. "Well, if it was some sort of strange drug in the water, all three of you should be affected. You all eat and drink the same stuff, right?" I nodded. "And if it was mental illness, likely it would only be one of your family members affected. I mean, what are the chances that two people would develop a serious psychotic disorder at the exact same time? And schizophrenia is extremely rare in children anyways." "So what does that leave?" I asked. He shrugged. "I don't know, maybe body snatchers, aliens, mad scientists cloning people in secret government experiments. Who the hell knows?" I laughed at that. Hearing it put into words made it sound totally insane. "Aliens? Body snatchers," I said, scoffing. "That's all science fiction crap. This is real, man. It's real, and I don't know what to do." "You should leave your house immediately. You can come stay with me for a few days," Richie said. I shook my head. I can't just leave my family behind, I said, realizing how feeble the argument sounded. I had just said these people weren't my family after all, but Richie understood. You mean you can't leave until you find out what might have happened, he asked. My head slumped, all the tiredness and fear from the past weeks leaving me lethargic and bone-tired. I just can't leave, I said again, feeling like a prisoner. The prisoner feeling different. Things began to get stranger after that. Pets began to disappear. All across the neighborhood, I would see signs for missing dogs and cats. Normally, Emma would have become despondent over this. She was an animal lover who often donated to charities for homeless or abandoned pets. She had an ass piece sticker on her car. But as I knew early on in my heart, it was not Emma I was living with anymore. During the first days, I thought perhaps some toxin in the food or water had caused brain damage and personality changes in my family. Maybe it was an intentional release of some chemical weapons agent by the government or a terrorist organization. All of these thoughts passed through my head, but my intuition told me over and over that they were all dead ends or red herrings. The truth was, these people were not my family. I knew it in my heart from the very beginning. I could see it in the way their eyes gleamed during the night as they crept around the house, never sleeping, moving as silently as cats stalking their prey. I would hear floorboards creak outside the door as one or maybe both of them stood there for hours on end in the middle of the night, and my heart would begin beating fast. Dark bags began to form under my eyes as I slept less and less. The only release I had was work, but every night I would have to come back to these people who I didn't know, but who looked identical to my family. I lost weight from the stress, and I began to smoke heavily. Normally, Emma hated it when I smoked, and she never allowed smoking in the house. Now, I chain smoked inside, and she didn't even seem to notice. She and Brandy barely talked anymore, even to each other. When they did speak, their sentences were short, clipped, and often bizarre. A month ago, I was sitting up in the guest bed, smoking and reading some Philip K. Dick. I had the 3 Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch in my hands, which ironically was a story about a man who had been replaced by an advanced alien civilization. It struck too close to home, and I put the book down, just staring out the window, the dim lamp I kept on through the night giving the room a yellow glow. And then I saw her. My wife was creeping out the basement door, barefoot, an insane smile plastered across her face. Her wide eyes looked around. She looked like a maniac who was trying to keep herself from descending into uncontrollable laughter. I wonder what they find so amusing, I whispered to myself bitterly, feeling cold hatred and spite towards these 2 strange people who had taken over my house. I saw her start towards the woods behind the house, taking a small dirt trail that ran towards a nature reserve a mile away. And at that moment, totally fed up and ready for this madness to end, I resolved to follow her. I got up out of bed, wincing as the springs groaned. I wondered if my daughter would be waiting outside the door with a bloody knife in her hands, ready to cut me open like my wife did to that poor possum. I heard a floorboard creak directly outside my door, and a slight, barely audible sound followed it. It sounded like giggling, a little girl quietly laughing. I swore under my breath. "Fuck it," I whispered, going to the window and opening it. The wood shrieked loudly, and I winced, looking back over at the door. But I heard no response from the other side. "You're afraid of a little girl finding out you're leaving?" A grown man, I asked myself, smiling at the absurdity of it. But when I remembered Brandy's cold, insane eyes, the smile went away. Yes, indeed, I was afraid of that little girl. I had no idea what she was capable of,